The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, which somehow made it worse. Tuesdays are supposed to be unremarkable, the forgettable middle child of the work week. But when I pulled that manila envelope from my mailbox, when I saw the investigator's return address stamped in the corner, my hands started trembling before I even broke the seal. I should explain. 3 weeks earlier, I'd done something monumentally stupid. I'd hired a private investigator as a joke. Not to follow a cheating spouse, I wasn't married. Not to dig up dirt on a business partner, I worked as a freelance graphic designer from my apartment. No, I'd hired him because I was bored, lonely, and convinced that my life had become so predictable that even a professional tracker couldn't find anything interesting about me. Follow me for a week, I'd told him in his cramped office above a dry cleaner on 5th Street. His name was Vincent Caro, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from old leather, deeply lined, weathered, with eyes that had seen too much. Document everything. I want to know what my life looks like from the outside. He'd quoted me $1,500. I'd paid half up front. Most people hire me to follow other people, Miss Thorne, he'd said, studying me with those ancient eyes. Why do you want to follow yourself? Because I'm invisible, I'd answered, and I'd meant it. At 32, I'd perfected the art of going unnoticed. I ordered groceries online. I worked from home. My last relationship had ended 2 years ago when Daniel told me I was emotionally unavailable, which was rich coming from a man who'd forgotten my birthday 3 years running. I had 1,400 followers on social media, most of them bots. My parents called once a month out of obligation. I was a ghost in my own life. Vincent had taken the job. Now, standing in my apartment with that envelope in my hands, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. The packet was thick, far thicker than I'd expected. I carried it to my kitchen table, poured myself a glass of wine, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon, and opened it. The first few photos were exactly what I'd anticipated. Me leaving my apartment building in my standard uniform of jeans and an oversized sweater. Me at the corner coffee shop, always ordering the same thing. Medium latte, no sugar. Me walking through the park with my headphones on, deliberately avoiding eye contact with other humans. Me buying cat food at the bodega, even though I didn't own a cat. I just fed the strays in the alley behind my building. I flipped through them quickly, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. See? I'd been right. My life was exactly as boring as I'd suspected. But then I reached the middle of the stack, and everything changed. The photo showed a funeral. A small gathering in a cemetery I didn't recognize, though something about the iron gates in the background felt disturbingly familiar. Maybe 24 people stood in a semicircle around a fresh grave. The photo quality was sharp, professional. I could make out individual faces, and every single one of them was crying. I looked closer. There, third from the left. That was my mother. I'd recognize her hunched shoulders anywhere, the way she held a tissue to her face. Next to her stood my father, his arm around her, his expression devastated. My younger brother Ezra was there too, and his wife Mira, and their twin daughters who I'd only met twice because Ezra and I had barely spoken since our falling out over our grandmother's estate 5 years ago. But that wasn't the worst part. The headstone. I squinted at it, brought the photo closer to my face, and felt my heart stop. Isla Thorne, 1992 to 2024. Beloved daughter, sister, friend, gone too soon. That was my name, my birth year. And if the math was right, that death date was yesterday. I dropped the photo like it had burned me. It fluttered to the table, landing face up. My family's grief staring back at me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together. This had to be a mistake. A sick joke. Vincent had followed the wrong funeral, gotten confused, somehow photoshopped my name onto someone else's headstone as part of some twisted prank. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. The faces were too real, the grief too raw. And there, in the background, I could see the corner of a building I suddenly recognized. The mausoleum at Evergreen Cemetery, where my grandparents were buried. Where my grandmother had been laid to rest on a freezing January morning 5 years ago. The last time I'd seen most of these people in person. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and pulled up Vincent Caro's number. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. His gravelly voice told me to leave a message. "It's Isla Thorne," I said, my voice cracking. "I need you to call me immediately. The photos you sent. There's been some kind of mistake. A huge mistake. Call me back right now." I hung up and stared at the photo again. My wine sat forgotten, and my apartment felt suddenly smaller, the walls pressing in. I picked up the entire stack and went through them more carefully this time. More funeral photos, different angles, close-ups of the mourners. My father's face was gray, aged 10 years. My mother looked hollow, broken in a way I'd never seen her, not even when her own parents died. And Ezra, God, Ezra was sobbing openly, his face in his hands, his wife holding him up. When had I last spoken to Ezra? 8 months ago? A brief, tense phone call about selling our grandmother's house. Before that? Maybe Christmas 2 years back. And even then, we'd barely exchanged pleasantries. Yet here he was, destroyed. The next photos showed the reception. A house I didn't recognize, though the style was familiar. Craftsman, probably somewhere in the suburbs. People milled around with plates of food they weren't eating, having the kinds of conversations people have when they're trying to process the unprocessable. And then I saw it. In one photo, someone had set up a memorial table. My memorial table. There were photos of me at various ages, as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, as a sullen teenager, as a college graduate with my whole life supposedly ahead of me. In the center sat a framed picture I recognized immediately. Me at my college graduation, smiling genuinely for once, my arm around my roommate, Kieran, both of us laughing at something now forgotten. I hadn't seen Kieran in 6 years. We'd lost touch after graduation, the way people do when life pulls them in different directions. But she was there in the funeral photos, standing near the back, crying into her hands. My phone rang, and I lunged for it. Vincent Caro's number. "What the hell is this?" I said before he could speak. Silence. Then, "Miss Thorne, I was hoping you'd call." "Is this some kind of sick joke? These photos are exactly what you hired me to document," he said calmly. "Your life from the outside." "That's not my life. That's my funeral. I'm alive. I'm standing in my apartment right now." "Are you?" he asked, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. "Are you certain about that, Miss Thorne? Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments right now. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And if you want to see where this nightmare goes, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about reality." I hung up on Vincent Caro. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. His question echoed in my head. "Are you certain about that, Miss Thorne?" Of course I was certain. I was standing in my apartment. I could feel the cool tile under my bare feet. I could smell the vanilla candle burning on my bookshelf, could hear the distant sound of traffic from the street below. I was alive. This was real, wasn't it? I walked to my bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Same face I'd seen this morning. Same slightly too pale skin. Same dark circles under my green eyes from staying up too late watching crime documentaries. Same small scar above my left eyebrow from when I'd run into a door frame when I was 9. I reached up and touched it, feeling the thin, raised line under my fingertip. Real. All real. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to think rationally. There had to be an explanation. Vincent was messing with me. Maybe this was some kind of test, or he'd confused his cases. Or he was just a con artist who got his kicks terrifying his clients. But those photos, the grief on my mother's face, the way my father's shoulders curved inward like he'd been physically struck. Ezra's tears. Those weren't performances. I'd grown up studying my family's faces, learning to read their moods and emotions for survival. That grief was real. I grabbed my laptop and opened it with trembling hands. First, I checked my social media. My last post was from 4 days ago, a generic sunset photo with an even more generic caption about gratitude. 3 likes, no comments. I scrolled through my feed. Nothing unusual. No obituary posts, no RIP messages, no indication that anyone thought I was dead. Relief flooded through me. See? I was being ridiculous. But then I noticed something odd. My last post had been made at 6:32 p.m. on Friday. Today was Tuesday. I tried to remember the weekend. Had I posted anything else? Had I even been online? I pulled up my browser history. Friday night, I'd watched Netflix until midnight. Saturday, nothing. My computer showed no activity on Saturday, or Sunday, or Monday. Just a blank gap where 2.5 days should have been. My chest tightened. I checked my phone. Same thing. My last text message was from Friday evening, a brief exchange with my downstairs neighbor about a package delivery. No calls, no texts, no app usage for nearly 4 days. Except that couldn't be right. I remembered the weekend. I'd stayed in, like always. Worked on a design project, ordered Thai food, binge-watched a new series. Normal weekend things. Except when I tried to recall specific details, everything went fuzzy. What series had I watched? I couldn't remember. What design project? My computer showed no recent work files. Thai food from where? I checked my credit card transactions online. Nothing since Friday afternoon when I'd bought coffee. 4 days. Missing. Or maybe not missing. Maybe just unremarkable enough that I hadn't created any digital footprint. That was possible, right? I could have spent the weekend disconnected, living in meat space, being present. But I'd never done that before in my life. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the obituaries. Today's paper. Page B7. My stomach dropped. Vincent. It had to be. I didn't subscribe to the physical paper anymore. Who did? But the local newspaper had a website. With shaking hands, I navigated to it and pulled up today's obituaries. There, 3rd down the page. Thorne, Isla Marie, 32. Passed away suddenly on Saturday, November 23rd. Born in Portland, raised in Seattle, Isla was a talented graphic designer known for her quiet creativity and kind heart. She is survived by her parents, Robert and Helen Thorne. her brother, Ezra Thorne, and numerous extended family members and friends. A private funeral service was held Monday at Evergreen Cemetery. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Seattle Arts Coalition, where Isla volunteered her design services. She will be deeply missed by all who knew her. I read it 3 times. Each word felt like a hammer blow. Saturday. They said I died Saturday. The funeral was Monday. Yesterday. Which meant... No, this was insane. I was reading my own obituary, but I was alive. I was here. This was a mistake, a horrible administrative error, or someone's idea of a vicious prank. I called my mother. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. Mom's warm voice, now sounding distant and recorded. "You've reached Helen Thorne. I can't come to the phone right now, but please leave a message." "Mom, it's me," I said, my voice high and strange. "Call me back immediately. There's been some kind of mistake. I saw an obituary and these photos, and I need you to call me right now. Please. Mom, I'm here. I'm alive. Call me." I hung up and immediately called my father. Same thing. Voicemail. Then Ezra. Voicemail. Kieran. Her number wasn't even in service anymore. Panic was setting in now. Genuine terror clawing at my throat. I paced my apartment, which suddenly felt less like a home and more like a cage. Think, Isla. Think rationally. There was an explanation. There was always an explanation. Maybe this was an elaborate scam. Identity theft taken to some nightmarish extreme. Someone had stolen my identity so completely that they'd even faked my death. And now they were living as me somewhere while I what? Continued to exist in my apartment? That didn't make sense. Or maybe Vincent Caro was running some kind of twisted psychological experiment, following me for a week, then creating fake evidence of my death to see how I'd react. Some kind of Darren Brown-style mind game designed to mess with my perception of reality. But why? What would be the point? My laptop chimed. An email. From Vincent. Subject line: "You wanted to see your life from the outside." My fingers hovered over the trackpad. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it. But what choice did I have? The email contained no text, just 3 video files. I clicked the first one with a sense of inevitability, like I was tumbling down a hill and couldn't stop my momentum. The video showed me, or someone who looked exactly like me, leaving my apartment building Saturday morning. I watched myself walk to the corner, wait for the light, cross the street. The timestamp said 9:47 a.m. I was wearing my gray jacket, the one hanging in my closet right now. My hair was in the same messy bun I always wore on weekends. Nothing unusual, just me going about my day. Then the footage cut to a different angle, a traffic camera based on the perspective. I watched myself step off the curb at an intersection. A delivery truck rounded the corner too fast. I saw myself look up, saw my eyes widen in recognition of what was about to happen. The truck hit me head on. My body crumpled like paper, thrown 15 feet by the impact. I watched myself land on the pavement and lie completely still. The video was silent, but I could imagine the screams of witnesses, the screech of brakes, the horrible, wet sound of a body breaking. I slammed my laptop shut and ran to the bathroom, vomiting into the toilet until nothing came up but bile. My whole body was shaking. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. It was CGI, deep fake technology, Special effects. It had to be. But it had looked so real. The way my body had moved, the way the light had caught my hair, the absolute finality of that motionless form on the pavement. I rinsed my mouth and returned to my laptop with the determination of someone walking to their execution. I had to know. I had to see the rest. The second video was from a hospital. Security footage, based on the angle and black and white quality. I watched paramedics wheel a gurney into an emergency room, doctors and nurses swarming around it. The timestamp showed 53 minutes after the accident. I couldn't see the person on the gurney clearly, but I saw the medical team working frantically, saw them eventually step back, saw a doctor shake his head. Time of death, 11:03 a.m. The third video was the worst. It was dashcam footage from a police car arriving at my apartment building later that same day. I watched 2 officers enter the building. The video jumped, clearly edited for time, and then showed them knocking on a door. My door. Apartment 4C, the numbers clearly visible. No one answered. They knocked again, harder. Then they used a key. Building management must have let them in. The video followed them inside. My apartment. But not my apartment. It looked different somehow. The furniture was the same, but everything felt abandoned, dusty. The candles on my bookshelf were melted down to nubs. Wax pooled around them like they'd been burning for days. Plants I'd kept alive for years were brown and withered. The whole place had an air of emptiness, of a space that hadn't been truly inhabited in longer than it should. The officers walked through, documenting everything with their camera. In my bedroom, the bed was unmade, sheets tangled like someone had left in a hurry. On my nightstand sat an empty pill bottle. The officer picked it up, tilted it toward the camera. I could read the label. Isla Thorne. Prescription sleeping medication. Refilled 3 weeks ago. The bottle that should have contained 30 pills was empty. The video ended. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, my supposedly abandoned apartment, trying to process what I'd seen. The logical part of my brain insisted this was all fabrication. But another part, a deeper part that built in instinct and survival, was screaming something different. What if you've been dead for 3 days, and you just don't know it yet? I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that truck hitting me, saw my body crumpled on the pavement, saw myself lying motionless while strangers screamed and pointed. By 3 a.m., I'd convinced myself that I was having some kind of mental breakdown. Stress-induced psychosis, maybe. I'd been isolated for too long, living in my head, and now my brain was turning against me. That made sense. That was logical. People don't receive photos of their own funerals because people don't die and keep living. Except I could still feel everything. The scratch of my sweater against my skin, the ache in my lower back from sitting hunched over my laptop, the metallic taste of fear in my mouth. If this was a delusion, it was the most detailed, consistent delusion in history. At 4:30 a.m., I made a decision. I would go outside. I would walk to the corner where the accident supposedly happened and prove to myself that none of this was real. The intersection would be normal, unblemished, free of any evidence of tragedy. I would see other people, and they would see me, and this nightmare would collapse under the weight of reality. I dressed carefully, like I was preparing for battle. Jeans, boots, my warmest coat. I braided my hair to keep my hands busy. Then I stood at my apartment door for a full 5 minutes, hand on the knob, trying to gather the courage to turn it. What if you open this door and there's nothing on the other side? I shoved the thought away and opened the door. The hallway looked normal. Same beige carpet, same fluorescent lights, same faint smell of cooking from 4B where my neighbor Rashid always made something fragrant and spicy. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. It arrived with its usual mechanical groan. Inside, everything was familiar. The scratched metal walls, the panel of buttons, the handwritten note asking people not to smoke that had been there for months. I rode down to the lobby, and my footsteps echoed normally on the tile floor. The night doorman, Terry, who usually worked the overnight shift, wasn't at his desk. Not unusual. He often stepped out for coffee or a cigarette. I pushed through the front doors and stepped into the November night. The street was empty. Not unusual for nearly 5 a.m., especially midweek. Streetlights cast pools of yellow light onto wet pavement. A distant siren wailed, rising and falling. The city's normal nighttime soundtrack. I started walking. The intersection was 4 blocks away. With each step, I felt my certainty growing. This was real. I was real. My feet were solid on the ground, my breath fogged in the cold air. Cars passed occasionally, headlights sweeping over me. I was here, visible, alive. But then I noticed something odd. The cars that passed, their drivers never looked at me. Not once. I was walking alone on a city street at 5 in the morning. A woman by herself in the pre-dawn darkness, and not a single driver even glanced my way. I told myself it didn't mean anything. People minded their own business in cities. That was normal. I reached the intersection. The traffic lights cycled through its pattern. Red, yellow, green. Cars obeyed it. Everything looked completely ordinary. No memorial flowers or teddy bears left on the sidewalk. No candles. No indication that anything tragic had ever happened here. See? I was right. It was all fake. I stood on the corner where the video had shown me dying and felt a wave of relief so intense it made me lightheaded. I'd worked myself into a panic over nothing. Vincent Caro was a fraud, or a sadist, and I'd fallen for his cruel trick. Tomorrow I'd report him to the police, demand my money back, figure out how to get those videos taken down from wherever he'd posted them. But right now, I just needed to go home and sleep. I turned to cross back, and that's when I saw her. A woman stood on the opposite corner, staring directly at me. She was maybe 60, dressed in a long coat, her gray hair pulled back. But it was her expression that froze me in place. She wasn't just looking at me. She was staring with a mixture of pity and recognition that made my skin crawl. The light changed. I crossed toward her on instinct, needing to know why she was looking at me like that. But as I got closer, she backed away, shaking her head slowly. "Excuse me," I called out. My voice sounded strange in the empty street, too loud. Do we know each other?" She kept backing away. "You need to let go," she said quietly. "It's time." "Let go of what? I don't understand." "None of us understand, at first." Her eyes were kind but sad. "But staying here won't change what happened. You have to accept it and move on." Panic flared in my chest. "What are you talking about? What happened?" "Saturday morning," she said. "You didn't suffer, if that helps. It was quick." My legs felt weak. "How do you know about that? Did Vincent send you?" Is this part of his sick game? No one sent me, sweetheart. I'm just someone who knows the signs. She gestured around us at the empty street. Haven't you noticed? Really noticed? It's been 3 days. Have you eaten anything? Have you felt hungry or thirsty? Have you felt tired? Really tired? The kind that makes you need to sleep? I opened my mouth to say, yes, of course I had. But the words died in my throat. Because now that she mentioned it, no. I hadn't eaten since Friday. I'd poured that glass of wine yesterday, but never drank it. I'd felt emotions, terror, confusion, panic, but not physical sensations. No hunger, no thirst, no need for the bathroom, no exhaustion despite being awake for over 24 hours. That can't be. I know, she said gently. I fought it too. For weeks, I wandered around, insisting I was still alive, still here. But eventually, you have to face the truth. She glanced past me at something I couldn't see. They're waiting for you, you know. Your grandmother. She's been watching, giving you time to figure it out on your own. But you're ready now. My grandmother? My father came out as a whisper. She died 5 years ago. Yes, and she's been waiting very patiently. The woman smiled. You'll understand soon. Just try to be brave. And don't make your family wait too long. They need closure. She turned and walked away, and despite my desperate need to call her back, to demand more answers, I found I couldn't make my legs move. I just stood there on that corner where I'd died, watching her disappear into the pre-dawn darkness. Behind me, the sky was starting to lighten, not with the gradual gray of normal sunrise, but with something else. Something that looked almost like... I turned around slowly. Standing at the edge of the intersection, barely visible in the strange light, was my grandmother. She looked exactly as I remembered her, not the wasted, cancer-ravaged woman from her final days, but the strong, vibrant person from my childhood. Her silver hair caught the light. Her smile was warm and welcoming and heartbreaking. Hello, sweetheart, she said. I've missed you so much. Gram? My voice broke. Is this real? More real than you know. She held out her hand. You've been so strong, Isla. But it's time to stop fighting now. It's time to come home. Tears streamed down my face, or I thought they did. But when I reached up to touch my cheek, it was dry. Dead people don't cry. Dead people don't feel tears on their skin, or the cold November wind, or the solid ground beneath their feet. Dead people are just memories wearing familiar shapes. I don't want to be dead, I whispered. I know, my grandmother said. But you are. And holding on like this, it's hurting the people you love. Your mother can feel you, you know, in the house. She wakes up thinking she hears your voice. Your father keeps coming to your apartment building and sitting in his car for hours, hoping to feel close to you. And Ezra, her voice softened. Ezra is drowning in guilt because the last conversation you two had ended in an argument. It was 5 years ago, about your house. About money and pride and stubbornness, she corrected gently. About two people who loved each other but forgot how to show it. And now he'll never get to tell you he's sorry. Unless what? Unless you help him understand that you forgive him, that you always loved him, even when you were both too stubborn to admit it. She took a step closer. You can do that, Isla, before you go. You can give them all closure, peace. Isn't that worth more than clinging to a life that's already over? I thought about the funeral photos, my mother's broken expression, my father's grave face, Ezra sobbing into his hands. All that grief, raw and unresolved, because I'd died before making things right. How? I asked. How do I give them closure? You already know, my grandmother said. That's why you hired that investigator in the first place. You wanted to see your life from the outside, to understand what you meant to people. Now you get to show them what they meant to you. She held out her hand again, and this time I understood. This wasn't goodbye. This was transformation. From ghost to memory. From presence to peace. But first, I had work to do. Can you give me one more day? I asked. One more chance to make things right? My grandmother's smile was proud and sad and full of love. One day, she agreed. Make it count. She faded like morning mist, and I was alone again on the corner where I'd died. But I wasn't lost anymore. I knew what I needed to do. The sun rose over Seattle, and for the first time in 3 days, I saw the city as it really was. Not through living eyes, but through the filtered perception of someone caught between worlds. Colors seemed both more vivid and more distant, like I was watching everything through slightly warped glass. I returned to my apartment building and stood outside for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I went inside and up to the 4th floor. This time, I really looked at my door. 4C, with its brass numbers and the small dent near the bottom where I'd dropped a toolbox 2 years ago. I reached for the knob, and my hand passed through it. Of course, I'd been opening doors through memory and habit, not physical action. The realization should have terrified me, but instead, I felt a strange sense of acceptance. This was real. I was dead, and I had one day to make peace with it. I closed my eyes and pictured myself walking through the door. When I opened them again, I was inside. The apartment looked exactly as the police video had shown it. Abandoned, dusty, lifeless. The candles had burned down to nothing. My plants were crispy brown skeletons. The whole place smelled stale, like air that hadn't circulated in days. This was what death looked like. Not dramatic or cinematic, just the slow decay of spaces once inhabited, now empty. I found my laptop and opened it, or rather, I hovered near it and willed it to show me what I needed. The screen flickered to life. My email was open, filled with unread messages. Condolence emails from former clients. A message from the Seattle Arts Coalition expressing their grief. Spam, oblivious to my death, offering me credit card deals and vacation packages. And there, near the bottom, an email from Ezra. Sent Sunday night, the day after I died. Subject line, I'm sorry. My heart, if I still had one, ached as I opened it. Isla, I know you're gone. Dad called me yesterday morning and I still can't process it. I drove to the hospital and stood outside for an hour before I could make myself go in. They wouldn't let me see you. They said it was better to remember you alive. I keep thinking about our last conversation, about how I hung up on you when you said you thought we should sell Graham's house. I was so angry about nothing that matters now. Money. The idea that you were trying to control things. All the petty resentments we'd built up over years of not really talking to each other. I wanted to call you 100 times after that. I'd pick up my phone and dial half your number before stopping. Pride, I guess. Stubbornness. The same things that kept us apart for 5 years. And now I'll never get to tell you that I was wrong, that I'm sorry, that I miss my sister. Not the stranger we'd become to each other, but the person who taught me how to ride a bike, who stayed up with me when I had nightmares, who was my best friend before life got complicated. I know you'll never read this, but I needed to write it anyway. Maybe somehow you'll know. Maybe you already knew, and you were just waiting for me to figure it out. I love you, Isla. I always did. I'm sorry I forgot how to show it. Your brother, Ezra. I read it 3 times, and each time hurt more than the last. He was right. I had known. Underneath all the arguments and silence, I'd always known we loved each other. But I'd been too proud, too hurt, too wrapped up in my own perceived grievances to reach out first. And now we were both drowning in regret. But I still had one day, one chance to give him peace. I remembered what my grandmother said about my mother feeling my presence, about my father sitting in his car outside my building. They could sense me, even if they couldn't see me. Which meant, maybe, if I focused hard enough, I could reach them. I grabbed my phone, or the ghost of my phone, I wasn't sure anymore, and tried to type a message to Ezra. My fingers passed through the screen. I tried again, concentrating on the sensation of solid glass under my fingertips, on the muscle memory of texting. The screen flickered. A letter appeared. Then another. It took me 20 minutes to type 3 words. I forgive you. I hit send and watched the message disappear into the ether. Would it reach him? Or would it vanish into whatever void swallowed communication from the dead? My phone buzzed. Ezra's response came almost immediately. Isla? My breath caught. He'd received it. Somehow, impossibly, I'd reached him. I typed slower this time, fighting against the reality that wanted to pull me away. Always loved you. Not your fault. Let go of guilt. 3 dots appeared, showing he was typing. They pulsed for a long time. Finally, is this real? Are you really there? How did I answer that? Yes, I was here, but also no, not in any way that mattered. I settled for now, won't be long. Need you to know, you were good brother, best friend. Miss you even when we didn't talk. The response came faster. I'm coming to your apartment, right now. Please be there. Please let me see you. Panic surged through me. Could he see me? Would my ghostly form terrify him, or would it bring comfort? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't deny him this. Come, I typed. 4C, but I don't know what you'll see. I waited by the door, watching the numbers count up on the elevator display. 4th floor. The doors opened. Ezra stumbled out, his phone clutched in his hand, his eyes wild and red from crying. He looked terrible. His hair was uncombed, his clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. This was what grief looked like on someone who'd been holding himself together for days, and now the dam was cracking. He stood outside my door, his hand raised to knock, trembling. Isla? He called out. Are you in there? I'm here, I said, even though I knew he couldn't hear me in the normal way. But his eyes widened. He'd heard something. A whisper, maybe. An echo. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. For everything. For the fights. For letting pride keep us apart. For not calling you, not visiting, not being the brother you deserved. I'm sorry I let you die thinking I didn't care. I never thought that, I said, projecting every ounce of feeling I had into the words. Ezra, I never thought that. The doorknob rattled. He was trying to open it, but management had changed the locks. He pounded on the door in frustration. Please, he begged. Please give me a sign. Tell me you can hear me. Tell me you know I loved you. I focused all my energy on the space between us, on the barrier of wood and lock that separated the living from the dead. I thought about every happy memory we'd shared, learning to ride bikes in the park, me running behind him, holding his seat until he found his balance, building blanket forts during thunderstorms, the way he'd cried at my high school graduation, proud of his big sister, the last real hug we'd shared before everything went wrong. The door swung open. Ezra stumbled inside and stopped, his eyes scanning the room. Could he see me? I couldn't tell. His gaze passed over where I stood, then back, like he was trying to focus on something that refused to solidify. Isla? His voice was barely a whisper. I'm here, I said. I'm right here, little brother. Something changed in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or just desperate hope. He took a step toward where I stood. I can feel you, he said. I swear I can feel you here. You can, I told him, because love doesn't end when life does. I learned that today. He couldn't hear my words exactly, but something was getting through. He was nodding, tears streaming down his face. I should have called, he said. After our fight, I should have swallowed my pride and just called. We wasted so much time. We did, I agreed. But that's okay. We were human. We were flawed. And we loved each other anyway. I moved closer to him, and even though I was insubstantial, even though I was nothing but memory and will held together by unfinished business, I reached out and put my arms around my little brother. He gasped. I feel it, he whispered. I feel you hugging me. I am, I said into his shoulder. I love you, Ezra. I always did, and I forgive you. More than that, there's nothing to forgive. We were both stubborn. We both let pride win. But it's over now. You have to let the guilt go. He sobbed openly now, his whole body shaking. But underneath the grief, I could feel something else. A lightness. A loosening of the knot of regret he'd been carrying. I'll do better, he said. I'll call Mom and Dad more. I'll tell Mira I love her every day. I'll teach the twins about you. All the good things. All the memories. You won't be forgotten. I know I won't, I said. Because you'll carry me with you. The good parts of me. Not the ghost. Not the grief. Just the love. I held him for another moment, then pulled back. My form was already starting to fade. I could feel the pull of whatever came next, gentle but insistent. My time was running out. Goodbye, little brother, I said. Take care of them. Take care of yourself. Goodbye, Isla, he whispered. Thank you for this. Thank you for letting me say goodbye. I left him standing in my abandoned apartment, and I knew he would be okay. The healing would take time, but it had begun. That was enough. But I wasn't done yet. I had more people to reach before I could let go. The rest of that day became a blur of moments and memories, each one precious and painful and necessary. I visited my parents next. They were at home. the house where I'd grown up, a modest craftsman in the suburbs with the garden my mother had tended for 30 years. I found them in the kitchen, moving around each other like shadows, going through the motions of living without really being alive. My mother was making tea she wouldn't drink. My father sat at the table, staring at nothing. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy with shared grief, the kind that makes words seem pointless. I stood in the doorway and watched them, my heart breaking all over again. They'd aged a decade in 3 days. My mother's hands trembled as she poured water. My father's shoulders were permanently hunched, like he was trying to fold himself into nothing. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I left you like this." My mother's head snapped up. She looked directly at where I stood, her eyes wide. "Robert," she said quietly, "do you feel that?" My father looked up. "What?" "She's here." My mother's voice was certain. "Isla's here." "Helen." "Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't tell me it's impossible. Don't tell me it's grief making me imagine things. I know my daughter. I carried her for 9 months. I raised her for 32 years. And I know when she's near me." She was right. The bond between mother and child ran deeper than death. I moved closer, and I saw her eyes track the movement, even though I knew she couldn't truly see me. "Hi, Mom," I said. She made a small sound, half sob, half laugh. "Oh, baby. Oh, my sweet girl." "Helen, what are you—" My father stood, confused and frightened. "Just listen," my mother told him. She closed her eyes and reached out her hand, palm up, waiting. "Tell me what you need to tell me, sweetheart. I'm listening." I thought about all the things I should say. Apologies for worrying them. Explanations for why I'd been so distant these last years. Reassurances about whatever came after death. But in the end, only the simple truth mattered. "I love you," I said. "Both of you. You were good parents. You did everything right. This wasn't your fault." My mother gasped, then started crying in earnest. Not the broken, hopeless sobs of the last few days, but something cleaner. Relief, maybe. Or release. "She says she loves us," my mother told my father. "She says it wasn't our fault." My father's face crumpled. "Isla? Baby, are you really here?" "I'm here, Dad," I said, moving to stand beside him. "I'm okay. I'm not in pain. I'm not scared. And I'm not alone." I thought about what the woman at the intersection had told me, about how staying here was hurting them, about how they needed closure to begin healing. I reached out and put my hand on my father's shoulder, and I felt him shiver. "Do you feel her?" my mother asked him. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, I do." "We have to let her go," my mother said, and I could hear the effort it took her to say those words. "We have to give her permission to move on." "No." My father shook his head violently. "Not yet. Helen, I'm not ready. I can't." "Neither can I," my mother said gently. "But it's not about what we're ready for. It's about what she needs." I wanted to stay with them, to hover in their kitchen forever, an invisible presence they could feel but never hold. But that wasn't love. That was selfishness disguised as comfort. Real love meant letting go, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. "She was teaching us that," my father said suddenly, his voice wondering. "Wasn't she? All those years when she pulled away, when she got so independent and self-sufficient, she was teaching us how to lose her." My mother looked at him. "Maybe. Or maybe she was just trying to find herself. Maybe both, I said. Maybe I was preparing us all without knowing it. They couldn't hear my exact words, but something was getting through. They looked at each other, and I saw understanding pass between them. They'd been together for 37 years. They had their own language, built from decades of shared experience. "We love you," my mother said, speaking to the air, to me, to the absence I'd left behind. "We will always love you, and we release you to whatever comes next. Go be with Graham. Go be at peace." "Thank you," my father added, his voice rough with tears. "Thank you for coming back to some goodbye. Thank you for being our daughter." The pull was stronger now. I could feel the world growing thin around me, like fabric worn transparent. My grandmother was near, waiting patiently just beyond the veil. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad," I said. "Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves. And remember, I'm not really gone. I'm in every sunset you watch together, every inside joke you share, every moment of joy you allow yourself to feel. That's where the dead live, in the hearts of those who love them." I left them holding each other in that kitchen, and I knew they would survive this. The grief would never fully leave, but it would transform from a crushing weight into something they could carry. They would laugh again. They would find reasons to keep living. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, they would feel me near and know I was okay. I had one more stop to make. Vincent Caro's office was exactly as I remembered it. Cramped, cluttered, smelling of coffee and old paper. But he wasn't alone. The woman from the intersection sat across from him, and they were reviewing photos spread across his desk. Photos of me. Or rather, photos of what I'd become. In some, I was barely visible, just a shimmer in the air. In others, I was more solid, almost real. They documented my 3-day journey from denial to acceptance. "She's close now," the woman was saying. "I talked to her this morning. She's starting to understand." "Good," Vincent said. His weathered face looked tired but satisfied. "She was a tough case, strong will, but they always figure it out eventually." I stepped into the office and they both looked up at me with no surprise whatsoever. "Hello, Isla," Vincent said calmly. "I was wondering when you'd come to see me." "You're not a private investigator," I said. It wasn't a question. "Oh, I am. Just not the kind you thought." He gestured to the woman. "This is Nadine. We help people like you. The ones who die suddenly, unexpectedly, who don't realize they've crossed over." "You hunt ghosts?" "We guide them," Nadine corrected gently. "We document their journey so their families can understand. We show them what their life looked like from the outside, help them see what they were too alive to notice." "The photos of my funeral were real," Vincent confirmed. "That was your actual funeral. Those were real tears from people who genuinely loved you. You asked me to show you your life from the outside. I showed you your death instead, because that's where the truth was." I sank into a chair, or the memory of a chair. "Why couldn't you just tell me?" "Would you have believed us?" Nadine asked. "If we'd met you at that intersection and said, 'You're dead, time to move on,' would you have accepted it?" She was right. I wouldn't have. I'd have fought it, denied it, ran from it. I'd needed to discover the truth myself, in my own time, on my own terms. "The envelope," I said. "You sent it exactly when I needed to find it." "Tuesday afternoon." Vincent nodded. 3 days after. That's usually when awareness begins to dawn. Long enough for the shock to wear off. Not so long that you're completely lost." "How many?" I asked. How many people like me have you helped? They exchanged glances. Hundreds, Nadine said. Maybe thousands. We've been doing this a long time. Are you... I didn't know how to finish the question. Dead? Vincent smiled. Yes, both of us. I died in 1987, Nadine in '03. We chose to stay, to help others cross over. It's our purpose, our way of making peace with our own deaths. You could have moved on, I said. Gone to whatever comes next. Why stay? Because someone helped me, Vincent said simply. When I died, confused and angry, a guide showed me the way. Now I return the favor. That's how it works. The chain of kindness that connects the living to the dead, and back again. I thought about that. About my grandmother waiting for me. About the choice to move on or stay. About purpose and love and the ties that bind us across the divide. You did good work today, Nadine told me. Your family has closure now. They'll be able to heal. That's a gift not everyone gets to give. What happens now? I asked. That's up to you, Vincent said. You can stay, like we did. Help others who'll die confused and scared. Or you can cross over. Be with your grandmother. Find out what's waiting on the other side. Here's a question for you. If you could choose between staying to help others or moving on to peace, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm curious what you'd choose. I looked out the window at the city I'd lived in for 32 years. Seattle in all its gray, rainy glory, the place where I'd grown up, fallen in love, lost love, built a career, lost touch with my family, and finally died in a moment of inattention. I thought about staying, about becoming what Vincent and Nadine were, guides for the lost, shepherds for the newly dead. It was noble work, important work, but I was tired, so tired. And my grandmother was waiting. I want to go home, I said quietly. They both smiled. Then go, Nadine said. She's been waiting long enough. I stood and moved toward the door, then paused. Thank you, I told them, for everything, for the photos, the videos, the hard truths, for helping me understand. That's what we're here for, Vincent said. Safe travels, Isla Thorne. I walked out of that office and into the Seattle twilight. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful. I'd never really appreciated sunsets when I was alive, too busy or distracted to stop and watch. What a waste. But I could see it now, really see it, and it was glorious. Ready, sweetheart? My grandmother's voice came from beside me. I turned and saw her standing there, solid and real and exactly as I remembered from before the cancer. She held out her hand, and this time, I took it without hesitation. What's it like? I asked her. Where we're going? Hard to explain to someone who hasn't seen it yet, she said. But it's good. It's peaceful. And everyone you've ever loved is there waiting. Everyone? Everyone who's crossed over. Your grandfather, my parents, old friends, even your cat from when you were 10. Do you remember Oliver? I laughed through tears. Oliver made it to heaven? All the good ones do. She squeezed my hand. Come on, let's go home. The world around us began to fade, not into darkness, but into light. Warm, welcoming light that felt like coming home after a long journey. I could see shapes in the distance, people moving toward us. My grandfather, who I barely remembered but knew instantly. My grandmother's sister, who died when I was 5. Others, further back, ancestors I'd never met but whose blood ran through my veins. And somewhere in that light, I heard music. Not the sad funeral dirges from 3 days ago, but something joyful, celebrating. A welcome home for the weary traveler. Isla? My grandmother's voice pulled me back. Before we go, look. She gestured back toward the city. I turned and saw my family, though I couldn't explain how. Saw Ezra returning to his house, where Mira met him at the door with concern that melted into relief when he smiled. Actually smiled, for the first time in days. Saw my parents in their kitchen, holding each other but no longer drowning in despair. Saw my friends posting memories on social media, celebrating my life instead of just mourning my death. I'd given them closure, peace, the ability to move forward while carrying me with them. That was enough. More than enough. Okay, I said to my grandmother. I'm ready now. We turned toward the light together, and I took my first step into whatever came next. As I did, I felt the last threads connecting me to the living world gently release. No more haunting, no more hovering between states, just forward motion, toward peace, toward home. My last thought before I crossed over completely was this. I'd spent 32 years trying to be invisible, convinced I didn't matter, that my life made no impact on the world around me. I'd been so wrong. The light was gentle, not blinding. It held me like water, buoyant and warm, and I felt lighter than I'd ever been alive. No weight of worry, no burden of regret, no ache of loneliness. Just peace. When my vision cleared, I found myself standing in a place that was both foreign and intimately familiar. It looked like the park from my childhood, the one with the duck pond and the walking trails where my father had taught me to identify trees by their leaves. But it was more than that. It was every safe, beautiful place I'd ever known, all layered over each other in impossible harmony. My grandmother stood beside me, smiling at my wonder. It's different for everyone, she explained. Heaven, the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, it shapes itself to comfort you, to feel like home. Is this real? I asked, then laughed at the absurdity of the question. What was real anymore? More real than what you left behind, she said. That world was temporary, fleeting. This is what lasts. We walked together down a path that seemed to know where I needed to go. Other people passed us, some nodding in recognition, even though I'd never met them. They all had the same quality, a kind of settled peace, like they'd found answers to questions they didn't even know they'd been asking. You did well today, my grandmother said. Helping your family find closure. Not everyone manages it. Vincent and Nadine helped, I said. Without them, I'd probably still be wandering around my apartment, insisting I was alive. They're good souls. They've helped more people cross over than anyone I know. Someday they'll move on too, when they're ready. We all do, eventually. Move on to where? She smiled mysteriously. That's for another time. Right now, you have visitors. We emerged into a clearing, and I stopped dead. Standing in the dappled sunlight was Oliver, my childhood cat, looking exactly as he had at his prime, sleek and proud and utterly uninterested in my amazement. He wound around my ankles once, purring, then wandered off to chase a butterfly that sparkled with more colors than should exist. He's been waiting for you, my grandmother said. Animals are better at this than humans. They don't fight it. They just accept love where they find it. and trust that everything will be okay. Graham? I turned to her, a question burning in my mind. When I was alive, was I really that invisible? That forgettable? Or did I just convince myself I was? She studied me with those wise eyes that had seen decades of life and now saw beyond even that. You tell me, after everything you learned in the last day, what do you think? I thought about the funeral photos. 24 people, all crying genuine tears for someone they'd supposedly barely noticed. My mother, broken by grief. My father, aged 10 years in 3 days. Ezra, drowning in guilt and regret. Kieran, who I hadn't spoken to in 6 years, showing up to mourn me. I was wrong, I said slowly. I thought I was invisible because people weren't constantly validating my existence. But I mattered. I just couldn't see it because I was so focused on feeling unseen. Exactly. My grandmother put her arm around my shoulders. You were your own ghost long before you died, sweetheart. You'd already convinced yourself you were invisible, so you stopped looking for evidence to the contrary. But it was always there. In the client who recommended you to others. In the stray cats you fed. In your brother, who called your number 100 times over 5 years, but never had the courage to let it ring. You mattered so much that your death broke hearts you didn't even know were paying attention. Tears ran down my face, and yes, apparently you could cry here. I wasted so much time, I whispered, being alone when I didn't have to be, pushing people away because I was scared they'd leave first. You were human, my grandmother said simply. Flawed and frightened and doing your best. That's all any of us can do. I want a do-over, I said suddenly. I want to go back and live differently, be braver, reach out more, let people in. I know. Her voice was gentle but firm. But that's not how it works. You get one life to live, and you lived yours the best way you knew how. Now you get to be at peace with it. How? How do I make peace with dying at 32 with so much left undone? By understanding that undone is a human concept. Here in this place, nothing is left undone. You lived a complete life, not a long one, but a complete one. You loved and were loved. You created beauty in your designs. You showed kindness to creatures that needed it. You made your brother a better man by giving him one last chance to say goodbye. That's not an incomplete life, Isla. That's a life well lived. I wanted to argue, but the words died in my throat. Because standing at the edge of the clearing were more people. My grandfather, who died when I was 8, but who I suddenly remembered with perfect clarity. My grandmother's parents, who I'd never met, but who looked at me with such joy and recognition that I knew them instantly. Other faces, further back. Ancestors I'd only heard about in family stories, now solid and real and welcoming. And in the center of them all, beckoning me forward, was someone I never expected to see. Kieran, my college roommate, my best friend, the person who'd known me better than anyone before life pulled us apart. She looked exactly as I remembered her. Wild, curly hair, bright smile, eyes that always saw through my bullshit. Wait, I said to my grandmother. But Kieran's not... She can't be. Dead? Kieran stepped forward, and her smile was sad. Car accident, 2 years ago. I was at a conference in Portland, coming back late at night. Drunk driver crossed the center line. My legs gave out. I would have fallen, but my grandmother caught me. No, I breathed. No, That can't be true. I would have known. Someone would have told me. Who would have told you? Kieran asked gently. We hadn't talked in 4 years by then. We weren't connected on social media anymore. Our mutual friends had scattered, and your family never met me. There was no one to tell you, Isla. We'd drifted so far apart that my death didn't even register in your world. The guilt was crushing. I should have stayed in touch. I should have tried harder. So should I, Kieran said. She came and sat beside me in the grass that felt like silk and sunshine. I had your number too. I could have called. But I was busy with my job, my boyfriend, my life. And you were always so independent, so self-sufficient. I told myself you didn't need me anymore. I did need you, I whispered. I needed you so much. You were the one person who understood me. I know that now, she said. And you know what? It's okay. We both made choices. We both got caught up in the forward momentum of living. And we both ended up here, where time works differently and regrets don't have the same weight. I'm so sorry, I told her. I'm sorry too, she said. But also, I'm not. Because look at us now, together again. No work or distance or awkwardness between us. Just us, as we were meant to be. She pulled me into a hug, and it felt exactly like it had in college when she'd comfort me after a bad day or a failed relationship. Solid. Real. Home. I've been waiting for you, she said into my hair. I knew you'd come eventually. And I knew you'd beat yourself up about things you can't change. So I'm here to tell you what you needed to hear when you were alive. You were enough. You are enough. You always were. We sat like that for a long time, and gradually other people joined us. My grandfather told terrible jokes like he had when I was little. My great-grandmother taught me a card game she'd invented. Kieran caught me up on the gossip of the afterlife. Apparently, even here, people found drama to entertain themselves with. And slowly, gradually, I felt the last pieces of my earthly pain begin to dissolve. The regret, the guilt, the sense of incompleteness. All of it was melting away like snow in sunshine. Can I see them? I asked my grandmother eventually. The people I left behind? You can, she said, but be warned, it might hurt. Watching them grieve, watching them struggle to move on. I need to know they're okay. She nodded and waved her hand. The air in front of us shimmered, and suddenly I could see through it, like looking through a window into the world I'd left. It was 3 months later. Winter had given way to early spring. I saw my parents first, standing in their garden. My mother was planting bulbs, crocuses and daffodils, flowers that would bloom in a few weeks. She looked thinner, older, but there was something different in her face. Not happiness, not yet, but not the crushing despair I'd seen in those first days either. My father stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, and they were talking quietly. About me, I realized, sharing memories. My mother laughed at something, actually laughed, and my father smiled. They're healing, I said softly. They are, my grandmother confirmed. It takes time, but they're finding their way. They talk about you often. They've started a scholarship in your name at the Seattle Arts Coalition for Young Designers. They're turning their grief into something productive. The vision shifted. Ezra now, in a park, pushing his twin daughters on swings. They were laughing, shrieking with joy as they flew higher. Mira sat on a bench nearby, her hand on her belly. Pregnant, I realized. another child. Life continuing, expanding, even in the shadow of loss. He calls your parents every week now, my grandmother said. Sometimes multiple times a week. Your death brought them closer. That's your gift to them, the healing you started when you said goodbye. And Vincent and Nadine? I asked. Are they still helping people cross over? They are. They'll continue until they're ready to move on. Could be years yet, by earthly time. They're good at what they do. The vision faded, and I was back in the clearing, surrounded by love and peace and the gentle presence of everyone I'd ever lost. Are you ready to rest now? My grandmother asked. You've been holding on so tight for so long, first to life, then to your connection to the living world. It's okay to let go completely now, to just be. I looked around at the faces surrounding me, family, friends, beloved pets, all waiting patiently, offering love without expectation. I thought about my life, the mistakes and triumphs, the connections made and lost, the ordinary moments that had added up to 32 years of existence. It hadn't been a perfect life, but it had been mine. And in dying, I'd learned something I'd never understood while living. I had mattered. I had been seen. I had been loved. Maybe not in the loud, obvious ways I'd craved. Maybe not with the constant validation I'd thought I needed. But in the quiet moments, in the private griefs, in the tears shed at my funeral, and the memories shared in the months after, there was proof that I'd left a mark on the world. I'd hired a private investigator to prove I was invisible. Instead, he'd shown me that I'd been visible all along. Yes, I said to my grandmother, I'm ready. She took my hand, and Kieran took my other hand, and together we walked deeper into the light. Behind me, I felt the earth world release its final hold. No more looking back, no more wondering what might have been. Just forward, into peace, into rest, into whatever came next. My last thought was this: if I could go back and tell my living self one thing, it would be simple. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. And when you die, whenever that may be, people will cry real tears and tell real stories and miss you truly. So stop hiding. Stop pulling away. Stop treating your life like something to be endured rather than lived. But I couldn't go back. None of us could. That was the price of mortality. You only got one chance, one lifetime, one opportunity to get it right. The trick was learning to forgive yourself for all the ways you got it wrong. The light embraced me fully, and I let myself dissolve into it. Not dying, I'd already done that, but becoming something new, something free, something finally, genuinely at peace. Isla Thorne had lived. Isla Thorne had died. And Isla Thorne had learned what mattered. That was enough. That was everything. And in the end, as the boundaries of self began to blur and expand, as I became part of something larger than individual existence, I understood the final truth. We are never really invisible. We're never really alone. We're all connected by threads of love and grief and memory that stretch across the divide between life and death, between past and present, between who we were and who we could have been. And those threads, those connections, they're what make us real. They're what make us matter. They're what make us eternal. If you made it to the end, thank you for staying with me through this journey. What would you do differently if you knew your time was limited? What relationships would you repair? What words would you finally say? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know. And if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you to reach out to someone you've been meaning to call, then maybe my death meant something after all. Maybe we both learned to see what was there all along. We matter, even when we think we don't, especially then.